So yes, my name in the SCA is Melisande Fitzwater. I am based in the Shire of Eppelheimer, which is most of the Midlands in the west of the island of Ireland. I've been playing now for 20 years this year, in fact. So I've been doing various things, but this was something that I started recently. And it was because our shire is becoming a barony, and has actually, I think, possibly actually legally become one, but we haven't actually had investiture yet for obvious reasons. The idea at the time was, because we're the first barony on the island of Ireland, we really wanted to go full Irish on this. And there was a general idea of theming the whole thing for the 7th to the 10th century in Ireland itself. So myself being more of a Renaissance girl, I wanted to make early period garb, and I really wanted the trim to be as authentic as possible. And I looked up a bunch of stuff, and I came across some information that seemed to indicate that the little dragons or petty dragons pattern seemed to be the best and the most authentic that you could find, which is actually this one that I'm going to show you guys now. And that's when you look up the dragons, the little dragon heads or little dragon patterns, that's usually what you get to see. This is a beautiful piece of work I saw on Etsy. Apologies for not having the name of the person, but that's usually what I found. And in fact, I was looking around, I was Googling as much as I could to try and find a pattern for that, something that I could understand. It was a little bit, I was wondering if it was going to be a bit too complicated for me, but while I was looking it up, I came across a blog from Ashleen's Weave, it's called, a German blog, and she seemed to be indicating that the usual pattern that you see for this is not as accurate as most people might be led to believe. It's supposed to be around 9th or 10th century, and it's there's an extant textile piece that was recovered from an archaeological dig in Dublin itself. And I managed to track down, and I don't know why it's so difficult to do, but I managed to track down an image of the original, which hopefully I can find. One second. There we go. That is an image of the original, and it looks quite different from the tablet weave that we previously saw, which is one of the more standard tablet weaving, in that the pattern is as much in the warp as it is in the weft. When you're tablet weaving, you'll be threading your different colors through the holes on your tablets, and it's all going to be according to the pattern, so you can achieve the little dragon look. But this is not. This is actually a brocade, and it took me a while to track down a pattern for that, and it took me even longer to find out how to do it. I don't know if I just was unaware of what the proper search terms were for looking for how-to videos on brocade tablet weaving. I was lucky that I have a lot of people in the kingdom who I could go to for help, and it really, they were able to show me videos of them doing their own work, which helped a lot, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I learned very visually. I could read a book, but it's not going to have the same impact as if I actually see somebody doing the work itself. What you're looking at the moment are what you normally get as regular patterns for tablet weaving, which shows you what colors to warp in which holes on the tablets, so that you can achieve your pattern in the tablet weaving. What you get for the brocade is essentially all the warping threads are the same color as your background. So whatever your background is going to be, which is the contrast to your pattern, all your tablets are going to be woven with that color. And you can see that if I show you this picture here. If you look at the top, that's how you warp your cards. So every single hole is filled with the same yarn that you're using. You'll have at the top, let me see if I can bring it up a bit more. You can see at the top, you'll have the Z and the S indicating from which angle you're going to thread the cards, whether it's coming in from the right or it's coming in from the left. But essentially, they are all the same. And this I found a bit confusing because I was wondering where on earth the pattern was coming from. And the pattern essentially is you are wefting twice. You've got the regular weft, which goes through the normal shed that is created from your cards, and you get the secondary weft, which is your pattern. And if I just move the camera to show you my loom here. So you get the normal shed that is created when you're turning your tablets and you're weaving your weft in between. You'll have your regular weft, which goes in between, and your brocade weft is threading in and out of the upper section of your warp according to the pattern. So you'll have under, over is the concept. Just a swift thing on materials, I'm using silk, a 60/2 silk, and I'm using gold thread. And I have my, it's the gold thread is loaded onto this, and I'm using the actual skein of silk for my secondary weft. And I'm using a bone folder to pick the pattern amongst the threads because it's pointed. You can go, it's very easy to go under, over, and create your pattern. So then you're actually creating a secondary shed, threading the gold through and then letting it go. The thing about brocade weaving is that it is slow and painstaking, but the results are really quite spectacular. I have seen a few other people do this, and not necessarily in as fine a project as silk and gold thread. I've seen people using wool yarn, and you'll get wider, thicker things, but essentially the effect is always really quite spectacular. And there are various uses for this that you can apply even to later period stuff. This is not limited to early period. Now, I want to switch the camera to show you, camera angle, to actually show you the work being done. So I have the pattern, and the pattern is the dark, each square is 2 threads. So each square is the vertical, so the upper and lower are counted as the same. So you have the 2 threads. So the dark is under the thread, the light is over the thread, and they're divided up into squares. So you would go under the first 2 and over the next 3, if you get my drift. I'll be showing you actually weaving it so that it becomes clearer. but you are essentially only weaving on the upper part. And if you look at the underside of what I've already woven, there is no visible pattern on the underside. So this is only showing on the upper part of the tablet weaving itself. So I will start by showing you a pic. Now, I keep track of my patterns. So this is the full pattern. You're getting 3 repeats of the pattern. You get the heads, and the heads. And as you know, threads twist when you're tablet weaving. So what I do is I do a full pattern, run of this particular pattern, turning the tablets in one direction. And then when I start again at the top, I start turning the tablets in the opposite direction, just so that I get the twist and untwist. There is a slight kink in the weave of the brocade when you switch between one and the other, but when it's stretched, it basically evens out. So don't let that worry you if you start to see things like that. And I also keep track of where I am, and it is so important to keep track of where I am on this. When I started working this, I realized usually when I'm crafting, I like to listen to an audio book or have some music in the background, or something that I can listen to or can occupy my mind if I'm doing something particularly mindless. This is not mindless. You have to be absolutely focused on this in order to not lose track of where you are. This particular pattern doesn't have a border, and I learned this the hard way. When I started, I did about an inch of it before I realized that I didn't have any borders on this, and therefore it wasn't going to look like the original as much as I wanted to. So always check if you're doing patterns, do they come with the border, or are they just showing you the actual design? I added tablets in the end, not as many as I probably should have, but when you've got a pattern like this without borders, always bear in mind you have to start outside the pattern. So you have to start with your border, your own border, before you even start reading what the pattern is. So the pattern goes horizontal. You can start from whichever side you like, it makes no difference. And I have threaded this so that the gold, when I pass it through, I pass it the opposite way to whichever way the weft of the background is going, so that they pull against each other. So essentially, when I'm pulling everything through and tightening it, there's a pull against it, so I'm not pulling something too tight. The only problem is if you do work with gold, because gold thread is essentially the metal, very thin metal, wound, spiraled around a thread core. I found that I could not just do the usual, leave it a loop loose on one side, turn the tablets, and then pull it through to tighten it, because pulling it through, it would strip the gold off the core, and I was left with just the core in the actual pattern. So you'll see what I do. When I made the secondary shed of the pattern and thread the gold through, I will pull it through tightly while it's still loose, and then rely on the whole battening down to really squeeze it together. And that's another thing with brocade, because you've essentially got it's almost like 3D printing, in that you have a line and then another line and then another line, and you only just start to see the pattern be created slowly, line by line. You have to make sure that you really push your weft together so that you can see the pattern forming. You can't afford to have it loose, basically. So I will just start. You can actually see the pattern. This is the pattern as it currently looks like. So you'll see the little dragon heads appearing there in the pattern. So you'll see just how fine this is. 3 repeats of the pattern makes about 2, you'll be lucky if you get 2 inches out of 3 repeats. So this, when I say it's slow and painstaking, I really mean it. So I'll show you how I pick the pattern now. Just rest the camera again. So the way I've stuck this on, I've put a hairpin under the line that I'm actually at. I've numbered every single line, and what I do is I keep a note down the side, and you'll see from this just how many notes I actually have. And I write down, okay, when I needed to put this down, my next line was line 52, for example. So I'm 52 backwards, so that I know both what line to start again with and which way the tablets were moving. So I'll just unpin the tablets. So I was at line 17, which is under there. So I have the shed there. So this is the upper part. So I'll start with my border, which is under, over, under. So now I'm starting at the actual line. So I have one second. Under. So I have under, because it's dark, 3 over. So I count 3 tablets over, and it helps to angle so that you're going up and over. Then I have under, over, under, 3 over, then under, over, under, over, and under, 3 over, 1 under, and then I have the border. Which is under, over, under. So the bone folder is now holding the pattern. I turn it sideways to create a second shed, and the gold goes through that. So I will pull this through tight straight away, and I will actually use this to push it down a bit, but it doesn't really matter because we'll be pushing it down really tightly after. So then once I'm good, I take it out, get the weft for the background, put it through the main shed that is created by the tablets. So that goes through the opposite way. I'll leave a bit through, so that's still a loop as the standard way. Turn the tablets, I'm currently turning them backwards. I find it easier to separate them when you've got this many. And then using my bone folder again, I just push it down really tightly and pull through the silk, the background yarn. And then this, once I've turned the tablets, the action of turning the tablets means I have something to push against in order to really push the gold down. And once that's done, you move to the next line, which is line 18. And I start again with the under, over, under. And this time it's 2 under, under, 3 over, under, over, under, 3 over, under, over, under, 3 over, 2 under, and then under, over, under. So again, you have, this is now the pattern. Turn sideways to create that second upper shed, which you'll go through. Pull it tight. Make sure you don't twist, get your wefts mixed up. The red, my red is always behind, the background color is always behind the gold. So put that through, loose, turn the tablets. Make sure everything is nice and separated. Come down, batten it down, and pull tight. And if you're unsure, if it looks like they're separating a bit, just go through and really, really press down. I've been pressing down to the point where my loom almost squeaks with the pressure it's under. So don't be afraid. If you have a solid loom, you should be fine.
Might I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
I have a laurel. My laurel is actually laureled in brocade.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get the cover that you're trying to get by pushing super hard,
yeah,
which trust me, in the long term will actually break your loom because I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
If you use 2 metal threads, one going each way,
mm-hmm.
you'll actually get much better coverage.
That would be definitely interesting to experiment with. Yeah.
And that's actually how a lot of the brocaders seem to do it, because your supplemental weft thread needs to be almost twice the thickness of your warp threads, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have a lovely loom. I would hate for anything bad to happen to it. It's the only reason I sort of interjected. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, not a problem. It's actually not a particularly it's a good one, but it's not particularly expensive. Now it might not be particularly expensive because I bought it 15 years ago. It's an Ashford standard inkle loom, which is what I use. This is the bit where the tension happens, and you've got the dowels. I can make a maximum of 3.5 meters. I'm not sure how much that is in yards. Maybe about 6 yards, something like that. It's vaguely 2 yards something to the meter. So you can get quite a length out of it if you use all the dowels doing crisscross over the top of that. So it's pretty solid. But yeah, no, thanks for the tip anyway. So yeah, that is pretty much the basic. What to do? You have your 2 wefts, you have your background color, and you have your pattern color over the top. If you do it in thicker yarn, it's going to go faster because you'll be building quicker. Otherwise, it is not as fast as tablet weaving. So leave yourself plenty of time to create this, because it will take quite some time to create. And the finer it is, the longer it's going to take. The good thing about this way of doing things is that it's very, very freehand when it comes to pattern. I'm following a pattern that's been charted by somebody else, but you can imagine that if you have the grid yourself that you're working to, with however many cards you want to work with, you could create writing. You could weave a message on a belt, for example, or on whatever you want, really. On a belt, on trim, on garters, and you could really go to town on this. It's much more versatile than the standard tablet weaving, because the standard tablet weaving relies on the warp as well as the weft. And with this, you're really you can go to town on the pattern itself. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I can do more demoing of it. If anyone has any questions, I can really show you more examples. I can show you materials. So let me know if anyone has. It's the thing is about this is that it's not overly complicated as long as you get the concept of how it works. The fact that it's working on the upper part of your tablet weaving, the fact that the tablets themselves are there to weave the background upon which your pattern sits, essentially. When I first started, this is one of the things that, for example, really wasn't clear to me when I started. When I first started, I was trying to weave with the bottom as well, and I was wondering why this was sort of, really looked like a spider's web in the end. It took me a while to even work that much out. So
did you show the image that you flipped to the image of the brocade on your computer, but it didn't show for some of us?
which particular image was it?
The second one that you went to show?
The original piece.
Yeah, not the Etsy one, but the one after that.
Yeah. I'll just switch to that now. That's what's in a museum in Dublin.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the actual 9th or 10th century piece. I've come across different people saying 9th, some people saying 10th, so I'm not entirely sure of the exact century of this. But
It's very.
yeah, the
I have a
big
question.
for me was that it was the right period, and it's the only such piece of textile that's been found in Ireland. There's this huge amount coming out of Sweden and Finland that have been found in archaeological digs, but Ireland seemed a bit lacking in that. So when I found out that this was actually found in Ireland, I don't know why. I don't think this is on display at the moment, which might explain why the image was hard enough to find. Yeah, and the person whose blog I found charted this, but she charted it without the border. So you can see that the border is really wide. So it would take significantly more tablets than I have got on my loom to account for that. I didn't go wide enough in my own border.
I have a question.
On the Facebook event page, if anybody wants to access this image.
I have a question about turning the cards.
Mm-hmm.
You said you turn them all forward until you can't anymore, and then you start turning backward.
Yes.
Why not just do like 4 forward, 4 backward?
That is what I do. You can do either or. Some people might prefer to do it until the threads get so twisted that
No, I hate doing that.
just go backwards. Because the pattern from this lady's blog has 3 repeats, I just turn the cards the same way for the full length of that. And then when I start at the top, I turn the cards the other way.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. You will notice
you.
that there is a slight kink in the tablet weaving when you do that, because the threads are now being turned in a different way. The whole pattern is sort of, it's like rolling your shoulders backwards and then rolling them forwards kind of effect. But it does kind of even out in the end.
It doesn't change the pattern?
The pattern doesn't change whichever way you turn the cards, because the pattern is in how you thread the gold rather than how you turn the cards.
Okay, thank you.
I'll see if I can show the full effect of this by turning the loom.
Can you take us off the share screen so you become bigger again?
Mm-hmm. So if you can. The effect. I probably should have a light on in order to shine it on the gold, but you hopefully she'll be able to see the full effect going down the length. It does make the gold stand out quite considerably. So that's about 2 months worth of doing a couple of hours in the evening. But it does turn out very pretty and very shiny. It's just hard to see on a screen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's difficult to see the pattern.
Yeah. I'll see if turning a light on makes any difference. One second. I suspect that the shininess of the gold itself might be not helping. I'll try different angles with the light.
Oh, we can really see that now. It's lovely.
Yeah. So yeah, the effect when you're using gold, the effect is, yeah, quite something. I suspect they have had professional photographers doing the photos of the actual historical piece, but yeah, that's the. There we go. So, did anyone have any questions about the actual working of the brocade? Because when I heard of brocade, the first time I heard of brocade, people kept moaning about how it was so hard, and it really put me off initially. But what they actually meant was that it just was an effort to make because it was slow, and you didn't achieve much quickly. Whereas with a tablet weave, depending on the pattern that you're doing, you can do it in an afternoon.
I've got a bit of a question about how you beat it down really hard. I think you said something about that, but can you say it again?
Sure. Most people would use, a regular pedal deck, but I found amongst my paper projects, I have a bone folder, and it just struck me that because it was pointed, it would be useful to pick out the pattern in order to thread the gold through. But I've also found it really useful in pushing the pattern down to make sure that each different weft line is really, really close. This has got to be really quite a tight weave in order to really see the pattern. But even the regular stuff will be fine depending on what yarn you're using. I suspect my bone folder, because it's so fine at the edge, works so well with this because I'm using silk, and so it's very, very fine stuff. But if you're using wool, for example, and the regular stuff will work really fine. You won't have any problems with that. Does that answer your question, or did you have anything?
Yeah, no, that was good.
Great.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Any questions? I mean, it's not a hugely complicated thing once you get the concept of it.
I've got kind of a comment observation. I've done a little bit of brocaded weaving. Actually, it was a lot of one project that was done just with the Inkaloom version. And I'm glad you did this, because in that one you do use both warps. And I was totally confused every time I get a tablet weaving book out for Brocade, because I couldn't figure out how it was working. And it's the fact that you only use the pattern on the top half.
Yes.
really important. That, and the other thing that I did learn doing the, I don't know if you ever saw the Celtic knotwork trim that was all over and the belts and stuff. That was, I haven't been able to look at that pattern since, but it was brocaded, but it was done on just the regular tablet weaving warp. And I found that doubling, like she was talking about, doubling the warp thread, the weft thread makes it stand out a lot without having to pound it nearly as hard. And
Yeah.
or using either one that's a double thickness or just double or tripling it seems to work. Also, and I tried to ask you about this at the event, but some of my tablet weaving books seem to think that another way that they seem to be doing it, but I could have read them wrong because I wasn't really understanding, was to like do 2 turns for each square. So you'd be basically doing each pattern, each square twice. Now, and that, I think that would do something similar. I mean, but it would be, but I found it awfully confusing. I wasn't able to, figure it out. But I suspect that's another way of making it larger, is if you do each square twice, then you're extending but you're also lengthening your pattern. So it would probably depend on the pattern, whether that worked or not.
No, that does sound like it would be quite interesting to try.
Yeah, but I just used the method. That seemed to work better for me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I'd be interested to try doing myself. Sorry, Dean, I saw you had a question in the thread. I'm not sure. You say the contrast thread goes under each of the border threads. Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, it does. You always start a line by going under rather than over. Even in the pattern, if you look at this particular pattern, you'll see the first squares are all dark, which means you go under rather than over. And so there would be a kind of a border with that, but not the big decorative border that you see in the original.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, you may have said at the beginning of the class, I'm sorry I missed it, but I was trying to get on and I was having issues.
Oh, no problem.
Is there a good substitute for gold thread for starting out and practicing with that you found it's good to work with?
You could probably do anything that is a little bit heavier than whatever yarn you're using for the warp.
I usually get a lot of cones when I used to professionally do tablet weaving, just the regular stuff. And I get cones of the silver and the gold and sometimes copper. Crochet companies make it. You can often buy it at Walmart in the United States, Hirschner's in the United States. And I used to get it mail order. Sometimes even I was using an APO address, and sometimes you can also find it over here now. There's a company in England that sells them, but I buy cones of it. I can even try to get a cone and show it, but it's fake silver, it's fake gold, and it's fake copper, but it looks pretty good. And it doesn't cut the way the actual metallic threads will cut your work if you're not, when you're first learning, especially if you're threading them in. Not so much if you're brocading, but anyway, that's where I would start just looking for cones at Walmart. I'll put the mute back on and go see if I can find a cone so you can see it.
Sagaris, do you know if what you're talking about are they threaded in twirl the same way as gold thread is?
It's kind of I believe it's probably an acrylic or a polyester or something. It's wound in a way, but it's not as, it's almost more of a yarn. I can go get some and take a look. And there's different versions of it. The thing about the brocading is I had lots of wire like you've got, but I gave it to Ishka because she was embroidering with it and I couldn't get it to work in the looms. But that stuff was real metal and I found it really hard to work with in threaded in patterns, but it's exactly what you want for brocading. But this other stuff will work for either. You can also embroider with it. But again, it is fake, and it looks really good it looks good in floor loom weaving too. I've used it with great success in floor loom weaving, but it's basically a metallic, fake metallic yarn.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Now, as long as you don't get the same effect of when you pull it through a tight weft, that it's not the metal doesn't remain on the outside and only the core threads through, then you're fine.
It does it if you really, really, really pull on it, but not to the same degree, you know.
Yeah, then that sounds like a good substitute.
Yeah, let me go find one, and I'll I have it in a box over here, and I'll bring.
The metallic thread I use is, I believe, metallic sewing thread, because the silk I'm using is silk thread.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if your thread isn't thicker than your weft, or if your weft isn't thicker than your warp, use more shuttles of it.
Yeah.
But keep each thread on its own shuttle, so you can set your tension so that the thread sits side by side on the warp and not twist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hilka, the universal formula SZ. I don't think there is a universal formula, at least not one I've encountered. It seems to be individual to every pattern I've looked at. But I am by no means a tablet weaving expert, so if anyone else can answer the question, feel free to chime in.
If, with your permission, if there's interest, I can post Master Rufus's brocading class notes to the chat.
Yeah.
If there's interest, okay.
Yeah.
I will go find them.
The more information, the better.
Did you post the pattern on here?
Not on here. I posted it in the Facebook group. I can
Okay.
post it on here if you like.
No, that's fine, as long as it's posted.
Yeah, no, it's. I wanted to make sure the link was posted on the Facebook event so that people could find it ahead of time if they wanted to, and also to make sure that credit was given to the person who did it, who charted the pattern.
Right, thank you.
Thank you for this class. Somebody had loaned me a book, but it was just like Greek to me. It didn't make a lot of sense. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, I don't do well just reading when it's a craft thing. I have to watch someone doing it in order to get my head around what's involved, and there's always so many little tips and twists that are left out of books, essentially, and you can't ask questions of books either.
Okay, these are really cheap ones, and you're right. This is wound around. This is sort of like what you get at Walmart, and it's obvious that I've been cleaning out my old weaving room, and the rats obviously got this one. But that it means you can see how it's done. But this is, you know, the actual pieces. Normally they look a little better than that. This is gold in the same stuff. This is actually looks like it's been braided on a machine. It's from the company in England. And then this stuff is really nice. I think this actually I got back in a job lot on S-Day or something. It's actually braided, and it looks much better. It's so old it might have real gold somewhere in its ancestry, but if it doesn't, it looks like it has real gold. So again, now that you can see better, this is really nice stuff. It's still fake, but it's really nice. This is the still intact version of the cheap stuff that you can get at Walmart or probably Hobby Lobby or anywhere like that. Mail order. Hirschner has a lot of this sort of thing, and this is some of the silver, but it's kind of falling apart, so you can see how it's made. And I don't know why File Explorer just went in front of my computer. Go away, go away. Okay, anyway, that's the stuff I have. I have what you can also get. The number 10 crochet cord is what I used a lot when I was learning just cotton crochet cord because it holds together well. It is much easier to work with than linen, and it's a lot cheaper than silk. And then you can move on to silk or cotton linen is another one I get from Sweden. It's a mixture of cotton and linen. So it looks like period linen, but it doesn't have the kabounce, which again is not going to be, that's going to be a problem for your warp threads, but not for your weft threads. You don't have any problems if you're brocading with weft. But anyway, that's the stuff I've got.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what kind of gold it is that I'm using, because this was a job lot I got off eBay, from a lady who had gone to some factory in France where they used to make materials for restoration, textile restoration, and they had a box of these that they had left, and she was just flogging them on eBay. So I bought 4 of them. So sadly, it's not a renewable resource for me, but I've been using it sparingly. Otherwise, the silk is from the Handweaver Studio in London. The loom is an Ashford loom, which is made in New Zealand. I can post links if anyone's interested.
And I use the sachet spindle, and the sachet looms I actually find a little bit better than the Ashford, but they're both pretty good. The only advantage of the sachet, and my original's from the 1980s, is it has a pull in the front. Your tensioner is in front of you, so you can pull it a little bit tighter. And I find that easier than reaching behind, but then I have short arms. So it's more of a preference of whether you want a back tensioner or a front tensioner. Yeah,
you don't have to use an inkle loom, obviously, to do this. If you've got something else that you use for tablet weaving, it's going to serve the same function. So whatever you use for your regular tablet weaving would work for this as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if anyone else had any more questions.
I think you did a really good job explaining it.
Oh, I'm glad. It's just I found it so hard to find information myself. I just wanted to make sure that anyone else struggling would be able to at least know how to start.
I'd given up.
There you
I've
go.
been scared of this for years.
Lots of beautiful brocade in the Barony in the future.
Yep. Well, so there's also you can do it without even tablet weaving, but it's a slightly different system, but it's basically the same idea. If you have an inkle loom or any kind of rigid heddle, you can do the same sorts of things. And there's actually quite a lot of good YouTube videos on that, but there's not a lot, which is what I learned from, because I'm the same way. I just don't get it if I'm just reading a book. But there's almost nothing on brocaded tablet weaving, and I hadn't looked for a while, but I think this really fills a need there. Because if you can do one, you can kind of figure out the other, but they're not the same.
Yeah, it's from doing this this first one that it made me realize just how versatile a project it can be, because as long as you chart the pattern of your choice and you're not restricted to the number of holes on a tablet, on a card, it really is whatever you want to create. I used to see these beautiful woven belts with mottos on them and things like that, and I always wondered how they were achieved. And it's just brocade, and it's just people with a graph paper, squared paper, you know, just charting their own patterns, and you don't have to worry about moving cards in any different direction. It's all about what the strings, what warp you're picking up or going over, whatever is under and over.
Just a slight correction.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually multiple ways of doing something like a name or something into a belt. Brocade is one of them.
Yes, no, that's true. Yeah, but it's just nice that I had found something else to do that pushed this particular method further.
Mm-hmm.
I actually saw a few years ago, I think it's from the 12th century, I don't have the documentation, but it was a great piece of tourist trash that some guy had brought back from the Crusades. It was a belt that was tablet woven that said Jerusalem on it. It's proving that tourist tack is not a new thing. You know, it was just, you could just see he was probably so proud of this belt. He dragged back from the marketplace.
Absolutely. So yeah, if I don't know if anyone has any more questions. Otherwise, I'll probably call this class. I'll I'll edit the video and I'll put it up on YouTube, and I'll post links in the event and maybe in other Facebook groups in case anyone wants to forward it to anyone who didn't attend and who's interested. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
you're most
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
You too.
You too.